Okay, so now for the ecology of fungus. So obviously we've kind of touched on how fungus has a lot of ecological roles that it's pretty key in. Now what we're going to get into is the different relationships they can have with other organisms. So remember that's called a symbiotic relationship when they're living with another organism. And there's a couple of forms of that, right? So we've got obligate symbiosis, we have facultative symbiosis. So obligate symbiosis is obviously going to be where that fungus has to live on something else in order to survive. So like some types of skin fungus are like that, where the only way you're going to get that is if you have direct contact with someone who has that skin fungus. And then you have facultative symbiosis, and that's where they would like to live on an organism, but they can temporarily live without them. Perfect example for that would be athlete's foot, right? So athlete's foot is you can have it and then you can walk across like a wet shower floor and you can leave some of that fungus there for a little bit and then someone else can walk by and get it. So it can live on that shower floor without you actually providing it anything. So another thing that they can do is they can cause diseases in plants. So a couple of different things that they can do is they can just spoil them, or they can actually make the food dangerous. They can make it carcinogenic, meaning that it could cause cancer, or they can make it poisonous. Another thing they can do is they can cause diseases. So as I mentioned, there's, athlete's foot, there's skin fungus, there's nail fungus, there's yeast infections. All of those are going to be diseases in humans and in animals too. Animals can get a lot of those things as well. Another cool thing about this stuff is that they can also have mutualistic properties. Let's see if I can get this to work. So as far as their mutualistic properties, one of them you either have or are going to look at in lab, and that's going to be lichens. And I've got a picture of lichens here, if it comes up. And so lichens are going to be a symbiotic relationship between algae and a fungus. And so if you think about a way to remember it, I used to teach little kids in the Everglades and we'd see lichens everywhere. And I said, so you've got Alice algae, and Alice algae's heading out with Freddie fungus, and they start hanging out with each other, that they actually move in together and they start liking each other. Get it? Because lichens, and it sounds like anyway, okay, so lichens are going to be important because they are really good bioindicators for air quality, so they only are going to grow where the air quality is good. They're also going to be important because they can help to break down rocks and things like that. Okay, so those are going to be lichens. Another example is going to be mycorrhizae. So if you remember with the plant stuff, I said if you see RHI or RHY, that usually has to do with plants. And if you look there, you can see that RHI. And so that's going to be a mutualistic association between a fungus and the roots of a plant. And what it's going to do is it's going to be provided with a place to live by the roots of the plant, and it's going to help the roots to actually absorb more, so they're actually going to help that absorption process happen for the plant. So it's a nice mutualistic relationship. Another one is going to be an endophyte. Now, if you look at that word, endo means inside, phyte means plant. So this is going to be a fungus that lives between the little cells inside of a plant and produces toxins that can make that plant poisonous for something trying to eat it, whereas without that fungus, the plant would be completely harmless. So that's kind of neat too. There's also going to be examples of mutualistic symbiotic relationships that they have with animals. So there are going to be some organisms that are going to eat grasses, and that's hard to break down, and so they're going to use the fungus to help them to do that. So that's going to be a mutualistic association. Another one that I just love, I just am obsessed with these guys, are going to be leafcutter ants. So if I can get this over to the next slide. See if just going down will work. Yeah. So here's a picture of leafcutter ants. You might have seen that on like Discovery Channel. I saw them in the rainforest everywhere I've been, and I just think they're the coolest things. And so what these guys do is they cut these leaves, they bring them back to their nest, and there's a fungus inside their nest. And the fungus is actually going to ferment the leaves, and it's going to make it into a form that the ants can eat a little bit more easily. I read about the study, though, that was kind of interesting, and what happened was in one nest, the fungus was over-fermenting the leaves, and so the ants were actually getting drunk off of it and coming out and kind of doing these weird sporadic paths and stuff like that. So sometimes it just provides a little party for the animals, and that's okay too. Okay, now going back to your notes, let's talk about where that can cause problems. So parasites and pathogens. So there's obviously going to be some that can be pathogenic, which means that they cause diseases. They can be a parasitic relationship where they're going to harm like a plant. They can do all sorts of nervous system damage. Another one that's kind of interesting to talk about is ergots. Ergots, if you were to eat it, it grows on rye seeds. So, you know, in rye bread, they have those little seeds. If you eat it, it could cause gangrene, muscle spasms, hallucinations, and temporary insanity. If you think about all those things I just listed, that's also common when people take LSD. So this is where the compound, which is called lysergic acid, comes from in LSD or acid. So it makes people hallucinate, and that's honestly what they think could have been with the Salem witch trials. That could have played a big role in those, you know, people that they thought were witches were just kind of acting crazy because they had eaten that. So kind of interesting there. All right. The last little part here is we're just going to talk about the four major phyla of fungus, which you may have seen in lab already. And the first one is going to be called Chytridiomycota. And remember, myco means fungus. And the beginning parts of these names are going to describe the reproductive structures that these guys have. So if we scroll through these pictures, oh, there's ergots, the little black thing growing on the rye. Okay, so Chytridiomycota. Chytridiomycota is thought to be the first fungus that actually evolved, and it's an aquatic flagellated one. This is one that's causing lots of problems with amphibians. It's actually covering their skin so that they can't breathe, and it's suffocating them and killing a lot of them off. So that's going to be the first one. The next phylum is going to be called Zygomycota. And it's called Zygomycota because of this structure that it produces called a zygosporangium. So a lot of times Zygomycota is going to be like black molds, and you can actually see it in that picture. But if we go to this next picture here, my pointer is just not working well, but there it is. You can see right where I'm kind of clicking, that's going to be the zygosporangium. So if you look through this whole process, what's going to happen, whoops, why is it acting weird, is you're going to have your positive and negative mating types, which are going to be male and female basically, and they're going to grow together. And when they grow together, there's going to be something that forms in the middle of them, and that's called that zygosporangium that you can see here. My mouse is just not showing up. I apologize. I don't know why. So, no, I don't need to do that. So anyway, on the other side of it, so you see that dark green, and then there's two light green things on the other side. So the two light green things on the other side are called gametangia, and the thing in the middle is called the zygosporangium. So you can think about it as two gametes coming together to form a zygote. And so that's going to be the one structure that anything in the phylum Zygomycota is going to create. Okay, now going back to your notes, if I can get there. Yeah, okay, we're going to just stay on your PowerPoints for the rest of this because my silly little cursor is not working. Okay, moving on. The next type is going to be Basidiomycota. Basidiomycota is going to be mushrooms, toadstools, puffballs, rust infections, and smut infections. So you can see here, these are going to all be an example of Basidiomycota. And then if we go to this next one, that's an example of a smut infection on corn. So sometimes that is okay, but most of the time it's not. But there are places that sell smut that you can actually eat, and it's supposed to be really good. I have not tried that yet. I don't know if I'm really game for that, but who knows. Now, the name of this phylum is Basidiomycota, and that's because they are going to create something called a basidia that's going to be their reproductive structure. So if we look at these mushrooms here over on the right, what's going to happen is those mushrooms have gills underneath them, and hanging off of each gill are going to be basidia. And what's going to happen is those basidia are going to eventually make spores, and then the spores are going to turn into a whole new organism. And so that's going to be something that everything in the phylum Basidiomycota is going to have in common. Then the next one, Ascomycota. Ascomycota is going to be a lot of the like green molds. It's going to be some types of cup fungus that you can see in this picture here. Here's a picture of the green mold. That's actually penicillium, and penicillium is going to be what's used obviously for penicillin. Another group that's going to be in here are going to be your yeasts. So that's a picture of yeast. And you're going to have other types of mushrooms like morels and truffles. So those are all going to be in this category as well. And as you can guess, obviously things in the phylum Ascomycota are going to create something called an ascus. And so if you look at this picture, there's going to be, towards the bottom, there's going to be a little structure called an ascus, which is going to be like that finger-like projection, and inside of it are going to be 8 ascospores. And eventually those mature and will release the spores, and then you can have the whole cycle start over again. So everything in the phylum Ascomycota is going to create an ascus as part of their reproductive structures. So that's it for fungus. Enjoy.